What's up, and welcome to the second episode of the Spider Bros podcast, a Marvel Spider-Man 2 podcast. I am CBK, the host of this podcast. Joining me is the co-host, Grayson, who you guys may be familiar with already. He was on the first episode. If you haven't checked that out, definitely go check that out. But Grayson and I have not had an episode to discuss the Marvel Spider-Man 2 gameplay trailer or reveal yet. So this is going to be that episode. We're super pumped about it. If you're watching this on YouTube, which I'm pretty sure it's the only place you can actually listen to the podcast, you'll probably notice that I'm the only person on video right now, and it's just because for some reason Grayson's computer decided to crash right before us hitting record. So Grayson has been patient and decided that, or we both decided that it'd be best to at least get an episode out, and he's actually going to be recording this episode through his AirPods. So we decided
Yeah, man.
it was way more important to
Yeah,
just
man.
not record anything. So we're going to deal with the crappy audio quality. It sucks, man. The first episode, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, and I was like, you know what? We're going to nail it on this episode. And then some unfortunate things happened. So hopefully you guys can bear with us on this episode and the audio quality isn't too terrible. We just found that we really needed to get this episode out and talk about our thoughts on the trailer and all of that good stuff. Right, Grayson?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I trust me. I am someone who I pride myself on trying to strive for great quality, specifically audio. At least if the video is bad, at least your ears aren't getting destroyed. So I hope it doesn't sound like I'm talking through a Pringles can. If it does, I'm so sorry. I got lost in the multiverse, the Spider-Verse, if you will. So I'll hopefully my computer will be a bit more. It's currently it is troubleshooting right now, but that will not be for another 30 minutes, which is time that unfortunately we don't have. So we're gonna just do what we can and talk about the biggest drop of Spider-Man 2 anything literally since the reveal trailer. And I've got thoughts. I've got thoughts, man. And I'm
I'm
excited to talk
excited.
to you about
Yeah.
them.
We
Yeah, man.
have, it's been, 5 days since the trailer? Yeah, 5 days. So we're recording on Sunday.
Already?
Yeah. Wednesday was when it dropped, so we're at 5 days now.
Yeah.
And Grayson and I somehow have managed not to talk to each other about this trailer. I purposely did not respond to your text when you said you had thoughts because I was like, this is not the time
Yeah,
right now. Obviously, I
I
was
know.
also like hyped and trying to make videos, so I didn't really get to it. But we definitely wanted to get an
Yes,
episode
totally
out
fine.
talking about this. So I feel like most of my subscribers probably already know how I feel, but I'll elaborate on some of the things as we kind of break down the trailer. But our structure for
For
this
sure.
episode is just going to be us starting at the beginning, and we're going to go over like certain little beats throughout the trailer and discuss our actual feelings on there. I think I, I'm going to go ahead and assume that we both have some like really positives, and there's probably some nitpicks in there as well.
Yeah, that's probably an accurate statement.
Perfect.
Um, yeah,
So I want to start by saying the showcase as a whole, I wasn't a huge fan of the showcase. Marvel Spider-Man 2 saved
agreed.
it for me.
Yeah,
But there was nothing major that I was super excited about except for Marvel Spider-Man 2. So as we were getting near the end of the showcase and Jim Ryan comes up and he talks about his last, the last thing that they're going to show, I got a little concerned when we opened up that trailer in the jungle. And I'm like,
I've
this is not
I've
New
seen
York.
your reaction to this, and I think I'm in a very, very slim minority when I say I was like, oh, it's Kraven. Like I was not worried at all. I was like, we're starting with Kraven. But I
Yeah.
saw your reaction and you were like, what is this? And I was like, bro, that's obviously Kraven. Where
Yeah.
I was duped though was not Kraven. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Like that was pretty cool. But I was not worried at all. But you and one of my friends, Caboose, if you guys know Caboose, he's a big comic book YouTuber, also covers Mortal Kombat, stuff like that. He's a good friend of mine. And he was the exact same way. He was like, oh no, it's not Spider-Man. And I was like, was I the only one that didn't think like I knew it was Spider-Man?
Yeah, you were. I posted a tweet about that. I was like, did anybody else get concerned about it opening up in the jungle? And it had like 1 million views in like
I saw
23,000
that.
likes. It was like crazy. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one that got concerned because I was devastated at the beginning of that trailer. And then we come to
Yeah,
find
yeah.
that it starts off with a great looking shot of Kraven. I thought it was a nice little introduction to, like, give us an idea of what Kraven's role in this game is going to be, like how he ends up in New York
Hmm.
City. And I was pretty pumped about
Yeah.
that. I thought, like, visually Kraven looked awesome. Like the design, perfect for
His
me.
design and yeah, and the casting and I blanking on his name. Is it like uh Jim Paris? Is that correct or am I off?
I think you're close. I don't know the pronunciation, but I know that you pretty much
Yeah,
got it.
he's in a couple of other games, usually in more minor roles, but lately he's been in some bigger stuff. I was looking at his IMDb, and he's got a good track record. And I mean, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, whoever's playing Kraven right now is doing a great job. So
Right.
I'm loving it. And I will go back and say that, like, I did think the first guy with kind of like the shaved head on the side and like the hair, I was like, oh, this is Kraven. I was like, I honestly did not hate the design. I was like,
No.
it feels, about an Insomniac's wheelhouse. But then when we got the real Kraven, I was like, oh, that's miles better, dude. Like,
Yeah.
that is way better than what I thought the chump Kraven was.
See, I have
Um,
a different
yeah.
experience because I did not know that this was Spider-Man at that point in time until I actually saw, like, Kraven. Or I think when I started
Yeah.
to hear the music build up, then I was like,
Hmm.
I know that sound. I was like, that's Kraven.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it didn't really click with me until really I saw Kraven, and then I was like, holy crap. I'm like, let's go. Okay, now I'm excited for what's to come.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we both like the design of Kraven, his little
Yeah, dude.
introduction. Obviously,
Phenomenal.
one of the big points, and it's kind of become a meme, is Kraven looking at that tablet and it's showing
Yeah.
New York. And I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. But we got like a little bit of Easter eggs or maybe some like teases at some villains. It looks like Tombstone could be coming back, which is great because he was probably
Yeah.
the best side mission in the first game. And then,
Yeah. He's pretty good.
yeah. And then obviously Wraith is going to probably be like a key
That
villain,
Yeah, that was
maybe.
definitely the biggest drop there is the Wraith design, because we go through and it shows Black Cat, it shows both Miles and Peter, both labeled as Spider-Man.
Hmm.
And by the way, I've been seeing some discourse on Twitter, people saying that there's some people that still believe that Miles Morales is not Spider-Man, and bro, I don't even have
Just get
words to
over it,
respond to that. Yeah, they're both Spider-Man.
yeah.
Shut up. You see like Rhino and all these, and I think Shocker is like the first one that pops up. By the way, prime material to get a reference to the '90s series where Peter is just out for
Chasing him.
Shocker's blood. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. Shocker.
Good times.
Yeah, but yeah, the Wraith, I was like, ooh, okay, I'm
Look
glad we're
good.
doing that, and yeah, it looks very good, and I'm excited as well because I feel like because Spidey and Yuri have that like kind like a more, I don't want to say a personal relationship, but like they were pretty close.
Yeah.
How this black suit, which I mean we are going to get into soon, will affect that kind of whole side dynamic will
Hmm.
be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we're gonna get into it, but I thought the trailer from the get go was like a great start. I did also get concerned again, and you probably saw it in my reaction when
Mhm.
it started to like pan up to the sky or the night, jungle, and I was like,
And that was
oh,
the
that's
end.
it. Like we
Yeah.
just got to see Craven. Okay, yeah, we know this game exists, and then
Right. Yeah.
to our surprise and delight, we ended up getting like an additional 10-ish minutes, if not more, of some
Yeah, dude. It was a
actual
lot.
gameplay. So it pretty much takes us from an overhead shot of Manhattan and something's going down. We got like, I don't know what you'd call it, a helicopter or something in the sky. And
Yeah.
we get a little look at what New York City is going to look like in this game. And more specifically, we get a look at what Queens is going to look like in this game. So
Yeah.
from the get go, how do you feel about getting that Queens confirmation?
So the queens and the extra boroughs, I'm a huge fan of. especially because probably just out of a little bit of personal bias, but my favorite Spider-Man game is Ultimate Spider-Man from
Hmm.
2005. And there's a lot of notes that are being taken from that game and that story into this, which I'm completely fine with. But yeah, that shot of Queens was great. Overall, and this will kind of lead into it. I will say we only got so much of New York City because they start off in Queens and then you don't want to jump the gun, but we hop to Miles and we kind of see it's more of the outskirts, those kind of
Right.
shipyards and dockyards and all of that. I will say New York City feels a lot different. It
Feels
doesn't.
full.
It feels very packed. I have in my notes here, and this is fresh off the heels, so like I've simmered on some thoughts, but I definitely was like, um, I, I said it got the Fortnite trailer treatment because it looks absolutely nuts slash packed.
Hmm.
But I was like the additions are really cool. I think in the trailer for what they were showing, they were like trying to really show off what all could be in there.
Yeah.
But because of that, I was like, oh, like this feels like completely different from the first game. But again, we only got a very select section, so I'm not worried about it. I think it looks great.
Yeah, and speaking of just like the fullness of New York City, I think there's just a lot more
Mm-hmm.
detail and structures, things that you
Mm-hmm.
can add that are just more than skyscrapers and buildings. But I don't
Yep.
know if you saw this on Twitter, but there's actually a shot where somebody like screenshot that there's actually like civilians looking outside of windows, like not cutscene, like
Really,
yeah, there's actually people that have been able to clip and show that there's like a man
that's
in a
so
business suit
cool.
looking out his window looking at Spider-Man as he's swinging. Like that is pretty impressive that they're able to do that. I'm assuming that the power of the PS5 has something to do with being able to like have people inside of buildings and make it visible all throughout New York
Yeah,
City.
yeah. I remember when they did the remaster, like the being able to have those really high definition reflections
Hmm.
um, of of Peter, and of course, this was just innate to the Miles Morales version on PS5. But getting those really crisp like reflections and everything was a big thing. I'm like, and now that just adds an even deeper level of immersion. And
Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned that because I didn't see that, but I was just thinking that the other day. I was like, when Miles is going like through between those buildings, I was like, yo, imagine if someone was just like, what do people think when they're like, what do they see
Yeah.
when they're inside those buildings and they're just seeing him zoom by,
Right.
and that like, and now I'm kind of like, oh, that's like actually really cool that they did that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just a small detail that really makes New York feel like New York, which I definitely
Yeah, dude.
appreciated. So,
Yeah, man.
we go to Queens, we see a football field, all cool and everything. But
Hmm.
what came next is something that I definitely did not expect. And
Yeah, I know you
you got
didn't.
Craven's guys, pulling up to this house at Queens, which I think is confirmed that that was Dr. Connors or Professor Connors like house in
Yeah, there
Queens.
wasn't they and I didn't know that at first until obviously like the kind of overall plot of what's happening in the demo, but I definitely thought that was Peter slash Aunt May's house.
I did too.
And then I was like, oh, gotcha. Like I read an article that yeah, they believe it was on Insomniac's website that was like, oh, Dr. Connor's house. I was like, oh, that makes complete sense.
Yep. So that, yeah, it's actually was confirmed in a blog, not on the trailer. So if you didn't watch or read Insomniac's blog, you definitely should do that because there's actually more details in that blog that you probably
Hmm.
missed out. And definitely answered a lot of questions in that blog. So people should definitely read that. But um, so Craven's goons or henchmen or whatever you want to say are pulling up to this house and they mention something of the beast. And the first thing I think of is like Venom is about to pop out.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
surely they're not going to show the symbiote suit already, like at the beginning of the
Yeah, man.
trailer. I was thinking maybe a tease at the end, and I do
Right.
see some symbiote tendrils come out. And I'm like, oh, that's Venom. And no, we get Advanced Suit 2.0 Peter, and then it transitions to the symbiote suit. So this is the thing
Yep.
that I'm most curious to hear your thoughts on, and that
Yeah.
is Insomniac's initial look at the symbiote, because I think that there can be some refinements to that. And I
Hmm.
think that it's possible that that suit can evolve throughout the game too. But
Yeah.
your initial
Yeah.
impressions on the symbiote suit.
So this is probably going to be the biggest discussion in the episode, or at least this was the biggest thing that I was talking to other people, except you, because I wanted to keep it for the episode, was this suit design. So for some context, the black suit is my favorite suit, not just for Spider-Man, but for any superhero ever.
Mm-hmm.
The black suit slash symbiote suit is like very near and dear to me. I love it. I think it is perfection. I mean, it was it was Spider-Man's costume for so long. Um, Even beyond it being the symbiote. So it I really hold it in a high standard, and it's very similar to like the classic suit where it's
Sure.
like people have tried to adapt the little things about the classic suit. You've got the Raimi version, and you've got Tom Holland's new version. You've got Andrew Garfield's, and of course you've got the comic versions. Like the advanced suit is obviously would not exist without the classic suit. But nothing will beat that classic red and blue,
Yeah.
and so this suit, when I first saw it, I hated it. I I did not like it.
Okay.
I will be, and I know I'm going to get crucified, but from that initial statement, I need to say now I don't hate it anymore. I it is not my favorite interpretation of the suit, but I don't mind it, and this is also a big redeeming factor for me. Before people tweet at me like, "Oh, bro, like you can just change it if you want to," and you're like, "Yeah, you're completely right."
Yeah.
There's almost guaranteed going to be other black suits that I can switch to
Yep.
because, and I put this in my notes, and I'm sure you've already noticed this, people have pointed it out, that there's a little moment where, the tendrils pop out and then he's in his red and blue suit, but then it starts to engulf him
Yeah.
and he's like thicker looking and before it fully like renders in,
Yep.
right? Um,
He looks
and that's
chunky at
almost,
first, and then it
yeah, and
just
it's
like,
like not, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, that has to be their way of them loading in the suit.
yeah.
And not, and more specifically, like if you're choosing, say you want to play that advanced suit, but you want to do a different black suit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you want to do the classic version, or you want to do the Renew Your Vows version of the black suit, or
Yeah.
even if, I mean, I don't know if it'll be in the game, but the Raimi version of the suit, whatever you want to do, they're probably going to allow you to do that. So I'm not worried about like, oh, like this is not my favorite version of the suit.
Yeah.
I'll say the overall concept of the suit I think is really cool. There's certain little things about it that I don't like. Of course, I just love that it's just straight black and white. They have the classic eyes, the classic logo.
Right.
I think it's really cool. Definitely feels like an advanced suit version of it. Like for example, there's these pieces, these the segmented pieces that look
Mm-hmm.
like armor,
Yeah.
and I think that's really really cool.
It's my
Um,
favorite part,
and
probably.
also, yeah, like I think that looks really sick, and I'm like, it fits in with like the advanced suit kind of has those armored components to it.
Yep.
And I think one really cool detail, one thing that I love about the black suit is the squares that are on the top of his wrist on his hand. But this version has almost like chevron, like triangle arrow shapes
Mm-hmm.
on the wrist, on the top, which I think is a cool little detail. I was like, oh yeah, that kind of fits with like the advanced suits more. It just however you want to describe it. Insomniac designers, you can tell me how you would describe that. But here is where I'll get into my little nitpicks, and this is probably going to be the most nitpicks for the entire thing because again I loved the gameplay
Yeah.
that was shown, really everything that was shown. There's a couple little things beyond this, but the main thing is I don't really like how I don't like the I don't like the texture of the suit. um, I think it looks too Venom-esque. I think it looks slimy and sticky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't love that. Because the way I've always viewed the black suit has been it's obviously when Peter got it in the comics, which was in Secret Wars, he knew they called it the alien costume, but it was only because he thought it was alien technology,
Yeah.
not that he thought it was a living being. And the real answer there is that the writers at the time did not know it was going to be alive. That was only something that was introduced later on, I believe, in the 90s. I think he got the suit in like 83, if I'm not mistaken. And so it was just always like, oh, it's alien tech. It can look like whatever he wants it to be. It can be street clothes. It can be his red and blue suit. He can make it look like whatever he wants. But it never looked, granted it's artist interpretation, but it never looked alive. And I think in this version, like, it looks very much alive.
Absolutely, it does. There's like moving
Yeah,
components to it.
yeah, like the muscle fibers on the unarmored parts are like moving,
Exactly.
and I think it's cool, and I think a lot of people like the symbiote to look like that. They want it to look more like Venom.
Hmm.
That's just not me. I've seen some concept designs of like, oh, what if Tom Holland's version of the black suit would look like, and it looks more like the Venom movies, right? Like it's
Sure.
veiny, it's slimy, it kind of looks almost kind of wet,
Yeah.
and that's just not what I'm a fan of. I like it to be here's my best comparison that I will tell you. I if the red and blue suit, if the classic Spider-Man suit was t-shirt and blue jeans, that's Peter Parker's everyday Spider-Man outfit. The black suit is a high dollar tuxedo.
Okay.
That's how I view it. It looks clean, it's sharp, it does look otherworldly. I like in a lot of versions that got either the blue or the purple almost sheen to
Yep.
it. I think looks really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there will be a version of the suit, like an animated version, or
Yeah.
even the classic version that will have that. And
I
I'm
think
gonna
the
I'm gonna
classic
eat that
could.
up, man. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a really cool aspect. This version does not have that, and that's fine. They want to go with a more like realistic take. Don't have a problem with that. But yeah, my main thing is I just don't like how alive it looks.
Yeah.
But I
So if
think
you
there's a lot of
squinted
people.
your eyes, you'd be like, "Oh, that's a perfect design."
Right, yeah, like if I squinted my
You're
eyes,
like,
I'm
"Oh, I
like,
got the
oh man, that looks
whites.
so
Yeah,
good.
you got the white logo. The eyes look great. Everything." So it's just like
Yeah,
mostly like textured base, and then the fact that it does
right,
look alive, which
yeah.
it kind of is alive.
And I'm not. Yeah, yeah, and that leads into another thing which we'll get into with like the combat.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying by any means knocking any of the Insomniac designers. I think this is a very well designed suit. I don't think it's like fundamentally just a bad suit. It's
Yeah.
just not really my cup of tea, and that's fine.
Yeah. That's why I love having conversations with you about Spider-Man, because it's never a toxic way of like criticizing or anything like that.
Right.
We always preface it by saying this is just our personal preference and it has nothing to do
Hmm.
with like, oh, that's ugly. It's never that
Yeah.
way at all. So I think I'm having the opposite effect. So, I mean, not the opposite effect of yours, but I'm looking back on like the first time I saw the advanced suit and I was like, don't like that. And then it ended up becoming my
Yeah.
favorite suit. And I think with the black suit on here, I was like, love it. Love it.
Hmm.
And then as time has gone a little bit, I'm like, okay, there's a little things that I would tweak here and there, just tiny
Sure.
little details. Um, but overall, I think it's a great design. And like you mentioned, and I would like to kind of just tell everybody in case you didn't know, there's going to be multiple suits out there. You can wear your favorite
Yeah.
one. If you like the classic suit,
Yeah.
like there's no point in Insomniac just putting the classic suit on there when you know it's going to be an unlockable suit that you can put on whenever you want.
Hmm.
So I see way too much hate going on online. Like people are so divisive about everything. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, dude, there's going to be like 20 suits for you to choose from. It's going to be okay. If you don't like this one, it's fine. Don't go attacking like artists and devs over this. It's just ridiculous. But
Yeah.
overall, the suit, like, I definitely liked it. I think the only thing that, and somebody else pointed this out to me as well, the only thing that I wasn't a big fan of is like, there's an angle where it kind of almost looks like Peter's wearing a helmet. Like, his head kind of looks more
Yeah.
like helmet-y. And I don't know. There's plenty of time for them. There's not really plenty of time to fix it, but if they want to make changes, they might be able to make some changes. And if they were listening, that'd be like the one thing where I'd be like, his head doesn't look necessarily connected to the rest of his body. It kind of looks like a helmet.
Yeah.
And maybe it is the fact that like you were saying the suit's like so textured, and then there's like almost some sort of separation around like the jawline and
Hmm.
the head almost looks a little less textured or alien like than the rest of the suit.
Yeah.
Um, but overall, I mean, like the white logo, great. The
Yeah.
eyes, perfect. I do think that there's a hint of blue in the eyes, but not too much. But overall, I'm happy with the suit. He didn't jump out of that like basement, and I was like, ugh, like that looks
Yeah.
rough, you know. My
Yeah.
favorite part is just the
I just
fact
have
that it looks like you can switch between the advanced suit and the symbiote whenever you want.
right.
I hope that that's the case at least, and that wasn't just a cutscene.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard to say. There's a lot of elements with regarding the switching between the suits, um, like that I have questions about. Like,
Hmm.
you know, so we see that the Kraven cutscene, and then what the gameplay that actually happens. It says 6 months later.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, we if you go ahead and say like, we know that it's Dr. Connor's house. Kraven is hunting the lizard, not Spider-Man,
yeah,
like at least currently, like his objective is the lizard, and he's like, oh, we have to make sure Connors is okay. He's the only one that can save Harry or make sure Harry is okay. And I was
hmm,
like, oh, okay, so Harry, he knows about Harry now. So it's like, so it's interesting to see where this will be in the story. I imagine probably within the 1/3 to, like, halfway mark. That's usually with how it goes with these things. It's really hard to say.
yeah,
But yeah, like that leads me back to kind of the costume. Is some people have speculated, and I have also speculated this, that like this, it seems like Peter is pretty comfortable or used to the suit at this point.
yeah.
Like he's had it for a little bit. But then the line that throws me off, which I think could be changed, is Miles saying like,
New
"Oh, new
threads.
threads,"
Yeah.
which is like, "Oh, like he hasn't seen this yet." That's interesting.
My theory
Um,
on that is just that maybe Miles isn't like as involved in the story at the beginning
yeah,
portion of it. And who knows, that could be like the first time Miles makes an appearance in the game for all we
that'd be
know. I
crazy.
mean, they'll probably have like a little team up at the very beginning. There'll probably be some like opening mission or something like that
Yeah,
with them. And then maybe there's a little bit of time apart. And then, you know, we'll see.
yeah. I definitely think, um, as the game goes on, Miles will play a prevalent role in the story. But I'll kind of loop back around to that to once we get towards the end of the trailer, or the end of the gameplay. I want to double back though on one thing, and just like, because I don't I don't want it to be like me just throughout the entire episode like seeming like I'm tearing this game apart. I'm genuinely not. But I want to go ahead and make a preface by saying there's something I don't like about the Kraven's force, and that is, Kraven is not the type of guy to have helicopters and drones and goons. That is
Hmm.
literally, like, that is just very antithetical to Kraven. Kraven is the guy that he will go into New York City in literally underwear and carve a rock into a knife and go find the lizard in the sewers himself.
Yeah.
I was, and so when I was like, okay, I was like, at first I was like, he had his own people. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, he's gonna go to New York by himself. And then it's like, no, we've got panther drones. Which, the animal drones are pretty cool. I find that interesting. I was like, that's an interesting idea. But I'm like, it then starts to go in. I was like, out of all of Craven, or sorry, out of all of Spider-Man's rogues, I was like, Raven is definitely not the one to be like tech based. I was like,
Yeah.
Spider Man's got tech based villains. He's got Green Goblin. He's got Vulture. Doc Ock, of course. Like he's got some pretty heavy hitters within the tech area, and that makes sense because Peter, is a very science based hero. He's a
Yeah.
scientist himself. But I was like, okay, I was like, Craven with the army of dudes with machine guns, and I was like, it to me, to be honest, and I have this in my notes, it just felt a little too mimicky of both Roxxon and Sable.
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, so that's the party that will have the heavy machine guns and drones and stuff. It's not Sable, it's not Roxxon, it's now Craven's guys. And
Right.
I was like, I don't love that, but again, like creative interpretation, like I don't think it's completely out of the realms in this version. And but I was like, oh, like he's not really even hunting Lizard himself. Like he sent a bunch of his guys to go to Dr. Connor's house, and I was like, all right,
That is
I'm
interesting.
just gonna yeah, I'm just gonna wait and see. And this is just the Spider-Man kind of purist in me.
Yeah.
But from what Kraven is one of my favorite villains. I wouldn't say he's my favorite by any means, but he's definitely up there. But if people know like what Kraven is about, he's definitely more tribal and earthy, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't say very technological based. I don't even know if honestly, like he it'd be rare for him to use a gun, like a machine gun. He might use like an old rifle or
Yeah.
something.
But now
But
he's got like
anyway,
guys
that
on jet skis going around New York City and
yeah, and I was like, man, Craven kind of balling right now. But
yeah.
all right,
I
but yeah,
think
I'm just one of that honestly. Now that I've simmered on the suit thing, I'd say I'm gonna double back sorry, retract my statement. That's probably my biggest critique with the entire thing.
yeah.
But again, I'm not letting it get to me.
I think I I kind of agree with you. I think and I know you feel the same way too. Just want to see how the story plays out itself, like
Sure, yeah,
what the reason is behind it. I know that like obviously you need things to do as Spider-Man within this game. It's a little bit different. You need guys to beat up and,
yeah,
things like that. So I do get that. I do wish that they found something else to do, and then Craven, because Craven can kind of be a little bit of a loner at times.
yeah,
Just let him be like his own little side antagonist. But yeah, it's like it seems like Craven's just invaded New York City at this point in time. But
yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's
And I'm
gotten
like,
crazy, and like, where's the mayor? Like, unless it is a whole thing where like the mayor, there's a lot of theories that Osborn, who I'm not even sure is the mayor anymore at this point in time,
yeah, it's hard to say.
hires Craven, and he's like, yeah, I'll need some people to do this and that, or I don't know, whatever it may be. But I wanted to move on to the
I'd say that.
actual combat, so we get actual symbiote suit combat.
Oh, yeah,
This is insane in my
yeah.
opinion. The amount of stuff
It's
that happens is, and I love it. Like I'm all for all the weird symbiote takedowns and like tendrils
yeah,
popping out everywhere. Like I'm for that in this interpretation of Spider-Man and getting to like do all the weird combinations I want to. I mean, like he's destroying people. Like one hit takedown. There's time where like freaking Spider-Man slinging a guy from like one side of a house to another side of the house, and then he does this little
yeah.
a million
And
kicks
then
against this guy.
destroys,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
just
just like
ability to reproduce. Like,
it's like nothing. Yeah,
rest in peace.
there was like no challenge for him, which I've mentioned this before on videos. When I play Peter Parker as the symbiote Spider-Man, I want that feeling of like I'm unstoppable. Like you and I played Jedi Survivor, and there's a part in the game,
Mhm.
spoiler alert for Jedi Survivor, where you get to play a seer, and I'm like, holy cow! I'm like, this is another level as I'm
Yeah,
playing
dude.
with her. I'm like, I thought I was really good with Cal Kestis, and then you're like, this is what it's like to have real power. And I was like,
Yeah,
just mowing guys over, like, and that's the feeling that I want when I play as a symbiote
absolutely.
Spider-Man in this game. And I think we're gonna get that. There's some impressive like animations and just really creative takedowns. I'm a big fan of the whole little symbiote fighting section that we got.
Oh yeah, it's very good. I'd say that's probably like out of the gameplay, my favorite point of it.
Yeah.
At first, I was going a little more Spider-Man purist, but then I was like, no, I'm kind of being a hypocrite because I was not loving the tendril stuff. I was like, man, at this point, he's literally just Venom. I was like, he's not even Spider-Man anymore. I was like, this dude's Venom. But then I was thinking back, and I was like, okay. Also, one of my favorite Spider-Man games is Spider-Man Web of Shadows,
Yes.
and that one is on par with this, where
It's
it's
very
just
similar.
crazy yeah, just crazy tendril attacks and stuff. And I was like, okay, all right.
Let's have some
I'm gonna give
fun.
it a yeah. I was like, let's have some fun here. Like, I'm not worried about it.
And you think
Um,
like maybe gonna get you're probably gonna get less than half the game with the symbiote suit. So why not go a little crazy?
yeah, and it's such an interesting point. I'm gonna go and say this before I forget. I was talking with some friends and we were like, okay, so you know, the assumption is that by the end of this game, you're not going to have the black suit anymore. And it's
Yeah.
like, but I'm still going to want to play with the black suit after I beat the game. So what are they going to do about that? Like, what's going to happen? I'm
Yeah.
like, am I going to have to just start a brand new game to play
I
as the
hope
black suit? And I
not.
was like, and yeah, here is my theory. It's a popular thing that games have kind of done lately, and I like it because it's like kind of lets me know like, oh man, what, I can't go back from this now. Where like games, like I think about more recently, like the Dead Space remake, or there's a couple other games that do it. You'll get to a point in the game, and then you're about to hit a big point in the story, and they're like, hey, like,
Oh yeah.
once you do this, you can't go back to this area, or you
Yeah.
won't have this anymore. Like, are you sure you want to continue, or do you want to keep
Yeah.
exploring?
Last time to
What I
upgrade.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, okay, what I like, I think even Spider-Man PS4 does
It
it, where
did.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, like this is, your last time to, do these things until you complete the game. Are you sure you want to? I imagine this is just my theory, because I don't feel like there's canonically a way for him to lose the symbiote and then just get it back just so you can free roam. I think it probably will get to a point in the game, unless they just completely surprise me and like he has the suit for the whole game and it leads into the next game, which would be kind of wild.
Yeah.
And if they do, hey, more power to them. But I kind of think it'll get to a point in the game where it's like, hey, like, at this point, you will not have the symbiote for the rest of the game until you beat the game, and we will bring you back to this point. Like, are you sure you want to continue?
Yeah.
Because I think it'll, you'll beat the game and you won't have whatever it is, and then it'll the credits will roll. You'll see the post credit scene, and then it'll take you back to that point where you don't have it anymore. And then I'm sure all the side missions will also probably plot wise revolve around, like Peter being a little bit more unhinged, or whatever. And I guarantee Insomniac has thought about this. But yeah, that was just a random thing that I was thinking about. Of like,
Yeah.
man, like, because other games where you play the symbiote, like, you'll lose it, and then once you get, like, you go back to the game, like the end of the game, they're like, oh, if you do that, like, they'll just give it back to you just to have fun. But with the
I
way
would
these games
love
work,
that actually. Like I
I mean, they might just be like, once the credits roll, you go back in the city, you just have
yeah,
it, and like none of it is like from that point forward is canon. But I think about
maybe
like
if you
the
100% the
PS4.
game. Like what if you like get through all the side missions, everything? It's like the platinum reward or something like that. And then
That could be cool, but I think some casual people might be frustrated because they're like, I don't want to do
sure.
all that. I just want to place the black suit again. So
Yeah.
they might just like. It's hard to say. I think either way, we're gonna have a way to post story to continue
I would
playing with
hope
that
so.
suit. But yeah, I'll be sad because I just want to swing around and beat up dudes maliciously in the black
Just want
suits.
to go on a murderous rampage across Manhattan and not
Yeah,
feel
well,
bad about it. Um,
yeah, exactly.
so after the awesome combat sequence that we both really liked,
Hmm.
there's a prompt to switch to Miles, and it's pretty smooth transition over to Miles if you ask me. And like
Dude, it's just
I
instantaneous.
God, dude, I love Miles Morales in this game so much, or just in this universe. But like his music hits as he's getting ready to slingshot off that building, which
Yeah,
like thank you Insomniac for the slingshot mechanic that was
yeah,
desperately needed in the first two games. But
yeah.
we get awesome sequence of Miles slingshotting off of the building, and I think that's actually where somebody screenshot somebody standing in a window. Like there was like one or two people in a window watching him do that.
That was the
And
exact moment that I was thinking about. Is like when he has the web slings or the web wings,
yeah,
he just bursts through in between these two like apartment complexes, and I was like, there's surely just some person like, on a phone call by the window, and they just see like this guy just like
yeah,
just fly
it's
past
just a
the window.
blur.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I mean, I want to go ahead and say that, like, dude, I think the web wings are so sick. I'm
it's a
so glad
game
we got
changer.
that. Yeah, the slingshot also dope. God, I feel bad though. Okay, all right. I'm listen. You're gonna be like, dude, quit
No, no,
complaining.
no.
I'm
If you're
sorry.
gonna say what I think you're gonna say, I'm gonna agree with you.
Okay, so it's it's two things that are kind of connected. The first thing is I think the slingshot is awesome. but I think it sent him like way too far. I was
I
like,
don't.
oh my, I was like, really? Okay,
Here's
all right,
here's why.
that's
Here's why.
fine.
It's the physics of it, because if he was just doing it from building, like building to building, I would agree. Like slingshotting from just webs
Yeah,
from building to building, but instead he uses those two antenna poles and he pulls
that
the
been
antenna poles
ah
back and they
okay.
fling him, and that's why I think it's okay. But if it was just like straight up like, oh, I'm putting two webs to a building and I'm pulling back, that would be way too far for me. But
Do you think you'll be able to do that with buildings, just not like send you as far? I
I
hope so.
hope so, but I have a suspicion that you're not going to be able. I think
That would
that
be
there's going to be
sad.
designated areas where you can slingshot. Just the way that it
Yeah,
like that little prompt came up. I think it was like L1 and X or something like that.
yeah,
To do that, and I was just like, However, or it could be almost like a tutorial where
yeah. Like
it's
that's where
like,
it launches you, and it kind of expects
yeah,
you to do that.
exactly. So it's just like, hey, you can do this now, as opposed to it being like, oh, you're in this certain area where you can do this. So
Yeah,
maybe it's just
yeah,
like a little tutorial. I hope it's not just only where there's those antenna poles throughout New York
yeah, man.
City.
I love being able to like. I mean, I imagine it's probably only going to be like when you're just like in a standing still position.
Yeah.
But I think back to like even the Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game, you could be like mid swing and you could like tether yourself to
Yes.
two buildings and then pull yourself back with another web, and
Yep.
you would like. I mean, so I hope you can do that, but if you can't, I will one tear will shed, but that's okay. But I am more excited about the web wings, and I think this is
Yes.
the thing that you're probably not like that we're gonna agree on. Dude, the web wing, like him going from like him, he went to the slingshot and then started swinging, and then just a meat like popped out the web wings, and I was like, oh, that's so fluid.
Smooth.
But don't like those wind tunnels.
Nope.
The yeah,
I
it just
the
was like okay,
circles.
this is yeah, I was like, okay, like I get like they're being they say in like the blog post like they're like the Skyline breezeways or whatever. I was like, okay, yeah, like I get that. Like he's gonna get in certain spots, there's gonna be a little bit of wind pickup, like completely fine. But yeah, it was like I'm not gonna lie, I was like, yo, like in the more recent Fortnite seasons, they have those wind tunnels, and I was like,
Yeah.
that's all I could think of, and I was like, yeah,
Here's
like
my
eh,
here's what I would like to say as like a constructive criticism to Insomniac. If anyone at Insomniac is listening and can push this to somebody, I'm not sure if it's too late into development to fix this or not. But first off, we got to get rid of the circles. I don't like the rings. They look a
yeah,
little too
a little
arcadey to
weird.
me. I don't think that they're very necessary, because I think that the actual visible wind in between the skyscrapers is enough. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's there. It's there. Like, so I know when I see that wind, I know that that's a time where I can use my web wings for a little extra speed boost.
yeah.
That's perfect for me. Like, I like that there's actually like visibly a little bit of wind. I'm fine with that, but I do not like the little arcade looking circles. I think that if we can get rid of that, and I also think that I understand that the wind is a little bit of a speed boost, but he's like
Yeah, I mean, he was
zooming
literally
through
just
that.
flying,
And
like
I was
straight
like,
line.
just literally tone it down to like, if it's at 100%, maybe get it down to like 75% faster,
Yeah,
and then just get rid
yeah,
of
I
the
agree.
circles. And I'd be like, I'm in. Like, that's all I need. I think that like people are smart enough to know that when they see that wind going through there, they're like, oh, I can like, fly right on through this and it'll carry me a little
Right.
bit faster. So that's just like, that was actually out of everything in this trailer, that was the one thing that like I could not stop thinking about. And that that's just like, which is a good thing. If you think about it, that's a pretty good problem, that like, if that's the worst thing
If that's
to
the only
have,
thing,
like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
like the glowing circles in the middle of the skyscrapers. Like, I don't think that's that bad, but I hate like, I didn't want to post that on social media at all, because you know how Twitter is. It's like, you post anything like
Dude,
constructive, then people take it to a
and
whole nother level, and then they make
you're
it
gonna get
toxic.
roasted, yeah.
And then it's like, if you think that's bad, what do you think about this? And like the water and like all this stuff. And I'm like,
Dude, the water thing, I
I'm
literally
like,
just saw
so
that about
done.
today, and I was like, bro, I really don't care. Like, how much of this game is going to be taking place in the water? How much time in the first Spider-Man game did you actually spend in water? Like, none.
Zero
Not at
point
all.
zero.
And I was like, people get so hung up on these stupid water physics, man. And I'm like, listen, like the game. I have this in my notes. I just think it looks absolutely stunning. Like,
Yes.
if they're gonna have like people inside the buildings and just this beautiful lighting, and New York is even more detailed in these extra boroughs, like I'm not the water, man. The water,
No,
like there's literally like I don't even know the statistic, but I'd
it's
love for Insomniac to be like, you know,
it's
like
the new puddle
how
thing.
much,
It's something
dude.
about
Oh
water.
my,
There's
I
something about
forgot
water
about that.
in these games where like people are so bothered by it, but ugh.
Oh man, I forgot about the puddles, dude.
It
That's
is
funny.
honestly, it
That
really is the new puddle thing. Like people talking about like how the water is reacting to Miles and the. I'm just like, who cares? I'm like, do the
looks like
alleys look good?
PS2.
Yeah, I'm like, do the skyscrapers do look good? Do the reflections look good? Like all that stuff. Like, is there destructible like environments when I'm like in combat? Like that's the kind of stuff that I care about. Like I don't associate
Yeah.
Spider-Man with the water at all. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's like, yes,
like who cares?
Spider-Man, the traversal,
That
the
didn't
one who traverses water. Yeah,
like I
that's so
like
dumb, dude.
exactly. I'm like that didn't cross my like I didn't even it didn't
I
register
didn't
with
even
me
think about
at
it.
all when I watched the trailer for the first time. And then like people start pointing it out. I'm like, yeah, it's not the best water I've ever seen. Like The Last of Us probably looks better. Like
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
who cares? Like to each their own. If you're
Yeah,
not gonna buy the game because the water physics don't look that great or don't look
that's like a whole new level of petty, man. Like, I
yeah
don't even. So I saw someone talk about it, and they were like, "This is disgraceful," and I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you?" And keep in mind, I'm someone who really does not care that much about graphics. You know, there's actually some games that have lower end graphics that I think because of that have more charm. You know,
sure
like I like more arcadey games. Like it's rare that I'm like I need 4K, like 240 FPS ultra on like I don't need that. I
yeah
almost all of these games, especially in the PS5, if they have a performance mode, I'm going with the performance mode. I will sacrifice my graphics for it just to run well. Like
yeah
that's fine with me. And some people are not like that, and that's okay. But I like the fluid nature, and this was so fluid.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, just like seeing Miles going through New York City, I thought the lighting was also like a major improvement to the first game. Like, I definitely think that
Absolutely.
like even as that mission where it started with Miles and progressed into like the harbors and all that, I thought that the lighting kind of changed a little bit and evolved. And that's something that I have been wanting for the games where like there's dynamic lighting. So maybe as the time of day
Hmm.
goes, it doesn't need to like have a day night cycle, but there's just an evolution where it's just not like three different skyboxes and that's all
Yeah.
you have. Like there's just a little bit more variety. And I actually felt like, it went from being kind of like afternoon or, getting close to evening and then where it's like, oh, it's going to start getting dark soon. Um, I'm not sure if that's just my own mind and my own eyes seeing that and projecting what I wanted to see, but I thought that the lighting was just a big improvement and on
Oh yeah.
graphics. Like New York City looked phenomenal, and I think it's only going to look better because actually one of the community directors posted or somebody asked the community director at Insomniac if this game was like the final build, like what we saw,
Yep.
and he basically just put a gif out that was somebody laughing and then just going no, like,
Yeah,
which is
I
basically
saw
like
that.
what you saw isn't even like close to what you know it's gonna look like, and I think that there's proof
I'm
in
sure
that.
this build is from months ago.
Yes,
I firmly believe that.
there's proof of that because there's the gameplay and then the actual screenshots that they posted look even better than, I know it's a
Hmm.
screenshot, but it's in-game screenshots, they looked even better than what we saw in the gameplay where like there's a little bit more textures and stuff like that. So we're still like probably 4 months away from this game even getting released. There's a little bit of time to like,
They got
polish
time,
it.
man.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to get into, and we went a little bit longer than I expected us to, but there's a
It's okay with
theory.
me, man.
Yeah, there's a theory out there, and somebody posted it on Twitter, and then every YouTuber in the world decided to make a video on it, except for yours truly. And it's
I know
that,
exactly what you're gonna
yeah,
say.
it's that is Peter Parker Venom in this
Yeah,
game? Um,
there it is, man.
it's a hard no for me.
Yeah,
um,
I'm gonna say no. It's if it's listen. Here's what I'll say. They're not completely invalid on this point. All right, I see it. I understand it.
yeah.
In the Ultimate comics, or at least in the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, and I believe the actual comics themselves, Peter Parker is Carnage,
Hmm.
which is a very interesting take. Basically, Venom and Peter both have two parts of the symbiote, and Peter doesn't know that it's still kind of like living on him, a very small part, and inevitably it gets activated and he becomes Carnage. It's like, okay, so I could see what they're doing there, but I'm like, when you hire, it, my thought process was like, okay, if Peter Parker was Venom, they wouldn't get Tony Todd. They would modify Yuri's
Yuri's,
voice.
yeah.
Yeah. I, I mean, it's got to be either uh, Eddie or Harry.
I'm starting to believe
And if
more
it's,
now that it's Eddie.
I just so yeah, I think that. So here's the thing: is I think that might be the more that I think about it. I've been on Twitter a lot today, and I've also kind of dumb of me. I don't know if this is just the way the algorithm works. I've been on like the normal timeline version of Twitter, and there was just nothing interesting on there. I've now switched over to the For You version, and I'm like, oh
I
my
saw that,
gosh,
yeah.
okay, there's way. Yeah, I was like, here's way more discussion about stuff I care about here. So anyway, I was looking through, and a lot of the stuff we're talking about today is on there. Yeah, I saw like, of course, the main theory, and shout out to my boy Cole. He mentioned this. He did not say that Peter was Venom, but you see the eyes kind of change at the end when he's like, so do I, about the teeth thing.
Yeah,
Um,
that is one thing that's like a valid point, I think.
yeah, and I was like, I definitely, and this has happened before. You see the symbiote fully taking over Peter and him becoming more Venom like, but I think Venom is a separate entity. I think it is a separate person with the symbiote. I don't think it's Peter.
We talked about on the first episode that we did last week that um there's got to be like a twist with the villain. And maybe it's just because that's what we expect from Insomniac. We got a twist in the first game with Otto being the actual villain of the entire game, and then we
Right.
learn that Finn is the Tinkerer. Unless you are familiar with the comics or just the Tinkerer in general, you saw that coming
Oh
from a
yeah.
mile away. But for the casuals, they'd probably be like, "What?" Um, so it's kind of gotten to the point where like everyone assumes that there's going to be this like major reveal or like a twist, and that honestly, like, that would be a jaw-dropping twist for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
um but the fact that somebody probably figured it out already, and I think that the teeth thing is a little bit too on the nose, makes me think that
Yeah.
it's not. And it'd be interesting because you're going from, I think you're switching the third act from like a Peter Parker game to you're maybe
Miles.
being a Miles, yeah, playing as Miles against Peter being Venom. I don't know. It's interesting to me. I think I'm like fully on board with the idea of the symbiote getting on Eddie at some point in time. That's just
Yeah.
my
I
thoughts.
think they intentionally will not show Eddie
Yeah.
if he's in the game. Very much like Otto in the first game. Um, Yeah, I will say this though, and I think you'll agree with me here. And I know we're kind of jumping ahead, because the probably should just the rest of the gameplay kind of goes through, and it's all it's just really high octane action. I mean, we get to see Miles some of his new Venom powers,
Yeah.
which look really cool. And of course, we go through, and Genki's and his little drone thing, all of that stuff. And it looks great. I also love Lizard's design. I just love that whole story
Mm-hmm.
beat in general. I think it's really cool. But in terms of like what there is else to talk about, like not a whole lot, but there's maybe like one or two things I can mention. But what I was going to say is I do affirmatively believe there will be a point in the game where Miles will have to fight Peter.
Yes.
I
Yes.
like it. it's almost confirmed,
And I can't wait for that.
because dude, and you know you're
I
going to be
hope we're
playing as
Miles.
Miles.
Yes.
Oh yeah, dude. Absolutely. And I mean
And he
that's going to
destroys
like
us.
yeah, dude, it's going to be rough. And you know, the upper hand is that Miles has invisibility and he has his new bioelectricity,
Mm-hmm.
which is now blue instead of yellow, which means that I'm assuming it's gotten more powerful. But I mean, the telltale sign right there is like the tagline is "Be greater together,"
Sure.
and the symbiote engulfs together, and then the electricity evaporates the symbiote. So it's kind of a double meaning of like, oh, be greater together, like the symbiote together, but also it's Peter and Miles. But I think that's also definitely hinting of like Miles and
He's got to be the one to
Miles and
get rid
Peter.
of the symbiote, right?
Yeah,
He's
I
got
think
to
that's
shock
almost
it
how
off
it's
him.
right, which I think is great because one of the weaknesses of the symbiote, there's two weaknesses: there's sound and there's heat or
Yes.
like electricity. So usually flames or electricity will roast the symbiote pretty good. So and I mean I think that's going to be one of the best moments in the game.
Yeah. It's an emotional one, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I'm excited for that. Well, I mean, I will eat my words if Peter does end up being Venom, and I'm sure I will be a fan of it. Um, but I do think it's probably just gonna be Eddie or Harry. But I think they probably
Yeah.
won't show Eddie off for a reason.
I,
I actually saw someone on Twitter post more Easter eggs. I only thought there was one Easter egg with Eddie, but like there's more than a couple throughout both games.
well, Eddie works at the Daily Bugle right now, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And so does MJ. So there's like a slight connection
Mm,
there. Um,
yep.
so I mean, we'll see. I'm gonna put myself on the record that if Peter ends up being Venom, I don't like that idea, but I fully expect Insomniac to make me like it. At some point in
Yeah.
time during the game, because that's just the
Yeah, I
way that
agree.
they do things. Like sometimes I hate that I'm just like a massive fanboy, like, and I just like everything that Insomniac does, but I can't help it, man. I just can't help it.
There's
Um,
hey, constructive criticism is okay. Listen,
yes,
some of these people, I mean, they blow even criticism out of the water, and they just go for full hate,
yeah,
which I just yeah, just not I can't tolerate at all. Like
nah,
when I speak about the things I love, I speak this because I want them to improve, not because
right.
I want to tear them down or tear down the people that have put so much hard work. And that's why, like from the get go with the black suit, I'm like, listen, there's some things I don't like about it, but I know like I think the Insomniac team did a great job for what they wanted to go for, and I still think it looks really cool
It's an
conceptually,
Insomniac
even if
suit.
yeah, for sure.
It is,
Uh,
and
yeah. I
I,
so I actually I don't know where you were about to go. I actually do have two little points that I wanted to mention, and that's all I have left in my notes.
hit me with them.
Um, okay, so one thing that one of my friends mentioned to me that I was like, this would have been interesting, but I don't know how it would have played out. Is I think that would have been cool if only one of them had the web wings,
I
if
agree.
either Peter or Miles. And I was like, okay, well then naturally I'm like, Miles already has the Venom powers to help him traverse, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we see that kind of gives him that extra speed and that height. But I'm like, so that means Peter would have the web wings, and I'm like, but normally the black suit doesn't have those, even though it
Yeah,
really can do whatever it wants. So I'm not mad about it. So yeah, I was just kind of thinking, I was like, it'd be interesting if because Miles has the bioelectricity, Peter in the black suit form has the web wings,
yeah.
which I believe in one of the collectibles in the first game, he had web wings,
Yeah,
and he was like they didn't
they're
work.
messed up. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one little thing, and then I think the only other little thing that is just a nitpick, and I almost am certain that it is going to change because it did in the first game, is I didn't love the UI. I thought the UI was a little just to me it was kind of just hard to read, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a bit like very techy looking. And so I mean, granted, I'm sure they'll have an accessibility option for me to like crank up the size of it, but there
Yep.
was like the bottom left abilities, the bottom right abilities, which I'm assuming one is gadgets and one is like symbiote powers, and then there was like the other stuff. So, but I'm
There's a
almost
lot
certain
going
that like
on the screen for sure. Because you have
yeah,
the
yeah,
bottom left, bottom right, and then you have like whoever you're talking to right here, top
hmm
right. Yeah, I definitely think that as well. And like you
I'm a
said,
fan of simple UI. That's
yeah,
just
me
me.
too. Like minimalistic is kind of what I go for, and you got your health bar,
Mhm.
and like there definitely is a lot going on. I think there will be some small changes. I wouldn't expect like a massive change, but like you said, like the
For
first
sure.
time we got gameplay for Spider-Man PS4, that UI ended up being something completely different than what we got in the game.
Yeah. So
Maybe
I
with
yeah.
little improvements here and there. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I think the design of the UI is not bad. It's just there's a lot to look at on your
Mhm.
screen, and it can kind of look a little like too much and overwhelming. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it'd be interesting if the black suit and the advanced suit had different AI. Or, I mean, sorry, not AI, UI. Um,
it's the world we
because I
live
was
in.
like, that would. Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh, it's getting to me. Yeah, that could be interesting. Or, I mean, I have to go back and see. Maybe does Miles have different UI than Peter? I don't know.
I can't
Maybe check that.
remember about that. One thing I do want to say, like real quick, if you didn't know already, on the blog that was written, apparently like
Hmm.
all the upgrades and stuff you do, and gadgets are also gonna like no matter which Spider-Man you do it to, it's gonna have the same like effect on the other Spider-Man.
Thank
So
God.
if you upgrade one, it upgrades both, and their whole like reasoning behind that is that Peter and Miles train together, and that's why they're kind of like equal with like their gadgets and whatever abilities. So that definitely is a plus.
Yeah,
I'm
I
really
would be mad if I had to play as one and I was like,
no
"Yeah, we upgrade him," and then I go back
no
to Miles and I'm like,
but
"I'm so weak."
yeah no
Yeah,
I think
W Insomniac.
I I love what they're gonna do with Peter and Miles, and I can't wait to see how they actually balance it out. Um,
Oh yeah,
Obviously, I want primarily like 70% of this game to be Peter, if not more. But I just
yeah,
love playing as Miles at the same time, so I look forward to that portion of the gameplay too. But
yeah.
is
I
there
think
anything else you
it
wanted to
was all
hit?
great. I'm trying to think. Going through the rest of it. I think this is more so of a question, and it goes back to kind of like the story.
Hmm.
I'm kind of like going back to like Miles being like, oh, he's this is the first time he's seeing the suit. I was like, man, this dude's reacting pretty okay for this thing that's spitting out like all these
Yeah,
tendrils and stuff. Like, I was like, and I'm curious. I'm like, what? Again, I think they have changed the dialogue slightly in this scene
sure.
to make it make sense. I don't.
Trailer
I think
trickery.
Miles has. Yeah, exactly. I think about the original gameplay demo of the helicopter kind of scene in the
Marvin
first
Lee.
game that was ever first shown. Yeah, exactly. And it was like Mr. Negative was in the helicopter, but
Yeah,
in the game it's not him.
right.
So they can change that stuff out. I mean, and especially they're both under mask, like their voice lines can change very easily.
Exactly.
Um, so I do think that there's probably some trickery going on there, but I was like, there's the point where which is a really awesome shot. But when Peter like kind of uh burst through the ceiling after Miles and Genki have found the skin,
Yep.
the leftover skin of Connors. Um, he's got all these tendrils like around him, and
The
I'm like,
silhouette.
bro, yeah, I was like, it's
Perfect.
menacing for sure, but I'm like, yo, is Miles just like okay with this?
Yeah,
like,
no
like,
threads.
yeah,
I would
it's
have been like,
like
ugh.
that.
I'm
I
like,
was
what are
like,
you
yo, what
infected
is
with?
that? Yeah, it's like that is not
They're
just
like,
like
we need to get you
normal.
checked out.
Yeah, but I'm curious to see how that plays out because I'm just imagining like if that's the case throughout the entire game, people are just like just ignoring that they're like because Miles picks up at the end that and we see it throughout the entire trailer that Peter is acting much more angsty.
Aggressive.
He's yeah, and I love it. Like I'm bully Lowenthal at its prime. But which by the way, I'm loving the passion that Yuri Lowenthal is having for this. Like day one, he dropped him in the mocap suit with the black suit underneath it. I'm like, man, Yuri Lowenthal, what a guy you are, dude. I like love your passion for this character.
Yeah, he's Spider Man.
But yeah, he's so great, man. It's almost like it's like kind of saddening to like hear him so angry because it's in the first
Yeah,
game like it's so like he's such a nice guy. The only time he ever even raises his voice really is in the end of the game when he's
Yeah.
talking to Otto, and that's not even like out of I mean, he is angry, but
It's
it's not like
emotion,
yeah, it's more like he's upset, not that he's like
disappointed.
pissed off. Yeah. So that just shows the range that Yuri Lowenthal has. But other than that, man, I'm looking at my notes and I don't think I have anything. I think we really hit all the beats. There was
Yeah.
one last thing that I wanted to say for anybody who is interested in getting some cool stories about the integrate. I think some stories that might inspire this game, and they're very quick and easy reads. They're both written actually by the same author. But if anybody is curious, Spider-Man Life Story is a really cool interpretation of it. Basically, it's about Spider-Man as if like let's say he was 16 back in the 60s when he was created. Like he actually ages as time goes on.
Hmm.
Um, but the black suit and Venom are both in those, both in that story. And there's some pretty cool stuff. I don't want to say it, but so Keenan, if I'll have to let you borrow it, it wouldn't take you long to read it all. There's some cool stuff that
Yeah.
I actually would love to see them do in this game. That would be like a huge twist. One in particular that I'm like, dude, if they did that, I'd lose my mind. And then the other one is actually, I mean, they're both technically what if stories, but the other one is Spider-Man Spider Shadow. And it is a 5-issue little story. It's
Mm.
actually one of my favorite Spider-Man stories of all time, and it's directly tied to the black suit. That's almost the entire plot of it. And it's basically, what if the black suit fully took over Peter Parker? Um, and I mean it's still, even then, just it's not like it is a dark story, but it's just a great Spider-Man story in
Hmm.
general. It's not all gloom and doom. But there's some really cool stuff in there that I'm like, if you think Peter's gonna be Venom in this game, you should read this story. You should check
Yeah.
it out. It might show you what it could be like. And if it does end up being like that, like I said, we'll eat our words. I think you're gonna be like, this is crazy. Yeah, I won't say any more than that. But both written by Chip Zdarsky, who's doing a fantastic Daredevil run right now, which I'm not keeping up with, but I've heard nothing but great things. But yeah, he check out Life Story and Spider Shadow. They're very cheap, short, easy runs. I think Life Story is 6 issues and Spider Shadow is 5. So yeah.
That's
Anyway,
awesome.
I've talked
We'll
long
have
enough.
to
That's all I've got to say.
that'll have to be like a new weekly episode thing. At the end of each episode, we'll have Grayson like come up with some recommendations, even non-Spider-Man related, for reading material. I think people would probably appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not again. Right, there's a lot of discourse right now. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you know what's going on in the Spider-Man comics right now, and it's actually kind of hilarious. But I've read I'd say I read a decent amount, more than the average Joe, that I could
Yeah.
help maybe give some recommendations. So yeah, man.
Awesome. Well, I had fun on this episode for sure. I hope everyone that's listening enjoyed it. Even though we did have some technical issues with the audio or Grayson's computer, we promise eventually we're going to get this right with the actual video and audio being
Yeah.
good. Um, I also just want to say a couple things. The next couple weeks, I think, are going to actually be pretty eventful. I'm still hoping that there might be something at Summer Games Fest, but um, I'm not like
Hmm.
I'm not betting on it or anything like that. But there is also another thing that Yuri and Laura Bailey are hosting, and I think it's like the Future Games Show. So they're
Hmm.
presenting for that, like just going over future games and stuff like that. I found it pretty interesting that both of them are going to be presenting, considering that they're like two of the leading actors for the biggest video game this year. So maybe they'll
Oh
have
yeah.
something small that they can drop for us. I also think like we're going to be getting some pre-order information soon, a release date, and then we always have that Game Informer stuff to look forward to. So over the next couple
Yeah.
weeks, we're going to have a ton to cover on the podcast for sure. And I also think
Oh
that
yeah.
there might be a chance that we'll get some guests on at some point in time, sooner than later. So definitely, keep your eyes peeled for that. I think that's going to be fun. I think Grayson and I both have some pretty decent connections in the YouTube community, so
Hmm.
there might be some cool people on the podcast. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And if you want to follow Grayson, his @ is actually on your screen, so you can see it there. Definitely give him a follow on Twitter. I'm sure he'll be tweeting more Spider-Man stuff as we get closer to the game. And you can follow me if you want to keep up with all of my tweets and all the random stuff that I talk about. And be sure to hit that subscribe button, of course, and turn on the bell notification so you can keep up with the podcast. We're going to aim to get this probably posted Mondays weekly from now on. I think that's maybe a good goal for us. Monday seems to
Yeah.
be a good one for
Uh,
podcasts. So
assuming that our schedules aren't super crazy
yeah,
and my computer isn't a dingledorf. So yeah.
we're gonna figure it out for sure. But we'll keep you guys updated if anything changes with that schedule. But I just want to thank everyone for the support on the first episode. 2,000 listens is more than I ever expected for a long form video. Usually all of my uploads are like 3 to 5 minutes long, so I wasn't sure if people are going to check out 40 minutes to an hour of us talking. But 2,000 was really huge, and a lot of you guys seemed to really like it and looked forward to the second episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one as well. But if there's anything else, Grayson, that you want to add as we close, now's your time to do so.
I have one thing to say, and that is be greater together.